these still
I'm
sound
saying, why are they all live? What are the links on them?
What?
Like if you go to those other test videos.
These? They don't, they, when you go into them, then they say that they're not actually, like, it's offline. See, like it says offline.
But it's the same link.
I think we had to create,
It's the same link as this one, though.
oh, it's the same one on everyone?
Pretty sure.
Oh, that's the wrong thing. I remember we had to like create a live event. There used to be a live stream tab. They changed this. I don't like the way they changed it. There used to be a live streaming tab on the side here, and you created an event.
Thoughts? Or are we not ready and just go to meet?
I mean, it'll work. I just don't know if it'll use the same link every time. So like we can, like I could start this and you could send a link out.
But the link might be different, you're saying on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all right. We can do that.
Yeah, because that's not a giver, because you send them a letter, it's going to be posted to the website, the link. And then what you'll see, Dave, up on the screen basically is what the public sees, but on a 15-second delay.
Perfect. All right, I just sent it. UFSD. Let me get my slide deck up.
1.
Okay. Hey, everybody, hang on a moment. There we go. Hello, everybody. There is about a 10 or 15 second delay, so pardon me if it gets a little choppy as I speak and then actually hear myself speaking back on the screen. I appreciate your patience, as this in essence is a test for us to be able to also provide for the community next week, and for me to not have to limit how many of you are available to join us today. There is a chat area that you might be able to, again, propose a question. If for some reason that's not available, you can always send a question to our new email address of returntoschool@bethpage.ws that's located on your screen. Thank you for letting me know. I'll speak up. In a few minutes, I am going to switch the screen over to a slide deck to give you some updates about where we are. I'm not looking up at the camera on the smartboard, as I'm also following along on my laptop screen here, so apologies that I'm not looking directly at you. Under this format, I do not see anyone, as we would with Google Meet. So again, the only communication I can have with you and note that you have some concern or question is if you type it into the chat box. Special thanks to Andrew Choi, Michael Gammon, Andrew Flanagan, who are also, Andrew and Michael are here with me, as well as Scott Harrington and Caroline are both here. We are working on a way to determine whether or not this is going to be recorded and stored and available, because the concern is that on YouTube, that these live streamings are available to the public. And of course, we want you to feel free to ask questions the way you wish. And I don't want to expose anybody's question to the public that the staff has. So if it is something that is only available publicly and I can't limit it to the very few of you who are watching and the rest of the staff, then the recording will be removed. If we can safely make the recording available, then we will do so. So 2:35, it's 226 of you join us so far. And I appreciate it very much, again, that you take the time to join us. This is important for us to give you some additional information and, again, to take whatever questions we can. We do have an additional new email address that's now listed for the public, which if you were stuck and not unable to write in a question in the chat, you could also put it there in the return to school at bethpage.ws. Okay, so I'm going to get started in a moment. Let me double check. Yeah, I think so. So I'm going to ask my IT support here to switch the screen over to our presentation. I can just go to regular present mode, right, guys? That'll work. Okay. There you go. So we're back in to our, oh, there I am in the corner. Nice. Okay, there we are. So in the end, we are getting ready to try to reopen schools. A lot of people have been involved. Many of you on this site watching alongside us. It's important to note that we've had a Board of Education who's been incredibly supportive in every which way. including extremely financially with all of the additional supports that we put in place for the health and safety, a very large group of dedicated staff, community members, healthcare workers who have been an ongoing part of our Return to School Committee. And all of us agree that the health and safety of our students and staff is #1 priority. At the same time, we know that the academic and social emotional growth of our students is also important, and we're trying very hard to find that very delicate balance between ensuring that we can be with our students in the best way possible for those goals while doing it in the most healthy and safe way. So as you know, we had some guidance given to us in July, which then got delayed. But schools were likely to be allowed to be open with phase 4 if our infection rate remains below 5% over the 14-day average, and that is still currently hovering around 1%. It does mean that we are in this region of Long Island in very good shape to attempt to do the best job possible to have our students in front of us. If the infection rate begins to rise, the important figure to note is the 9% over a 7-day average would automatically start a school building closing. But at this moment, New York State has decided that schools are open. Well, again, we've been working towards all of the health and safety aspects first and foremost, trying to remember that it's our responsibility to provide a robust educational experience. Best practices refer to both academic, social, emotional, but in particular, health and safety. Those best practices, as you know, are also continuing to evolve over time as we learn more and more things each week about what's best in dealing with this pandemic issue. We want to make sure that all of our plans, the 3 different types of plans, are predictable and sustainable over a period of time, and that we can transition between them because there is the chance that we may need to. So the decision, with the conversations with the Return to School Committee, with the conversations with the Board of Education, the PTA, hearing from our parents in our community survey with over 2,300 parents and students represented, is that we will be open K-12 with our all-in-person plan. And that means all students will be in school at the start of the school year, 5 days a week, every day. What are some of those specific, larger structural parts of it? Each classroom maintains social distancing and barriers. And we do have the potential, if every student showed up with 100% attendance in every school every day, in order to make that social distancing a reality, we may have to have a few students on a rotational basis cycle out to an instructional space that's supported by other staff. And again, that would be done very sparingly for that student. This way they would not have to stay home from school. We are also adding that all students and staff are required to wear masks, but that mask breaks will be provided. Grades K to 6 are going to be conducting school in cohorts where teachers will all go to them. Students will not get up and move to other classes. Grades 7 to 12, there will be the need for students to pass in the hallway and attend a different classroom, but that'll be done in a very different way than typical as well. And all of these plans in person require some compromise on our normal plans for the master schedule, where certain courses are often in certain rooms or certain parts of the building, and that is going to be one of the major compromises as we take the larger classes and move them into the larger spaces so that more students can fit maintaining social distancing at all times in their classes with you. So that is a bit of a disruption for some staff who have had certain history in particular rooms as a compromise to make sure that we can keep the students and distance from each other and from you. So the health and safety protocols that drive all of this are to maintain social distancing, requiring masks, and now adding barriers, those plastic partitions, one of which we have here next to us, and I'll show an example of a staged room in a moment. In these health and safety protocols, the guidance was pretty clear that you need to follow one, you could and should follow two. We've decided to follow all three at all times. That's a big important part of this to help make sure that you understand that we are doing our best to maintain that healthy and safe environment and reduce the risks dramatically, especially since the latest information regarding exposure refers to a 15-minute timeline of extended exposure as being the real risk associated with exchange of infection. So by having these barriers with social distancing, with students and staff required to wear masks, that's going to make it very helpful in trying to reduce the risks dramatically. What are these mask breaks going to look like? We're still working out the details, and that's a constant area that the health and safety people in the district and outside the district are constantly reviewing and trying to determine what that'll look like, because arguably you could make a case that anytime you're socially distanced, you could bring your mask down if you follow the guidelines. We don't want to go that far, and we want to start making sure that the masks are worn so regularly that people don't think about them too much, to help make it a more common day-to-day issue for everyone. So there are questions that you can chime in, and I'll be able to scroll down to them as I've done in the past. So we'll try to do it the same format as I've done for 3 previous meetings with all of you. So you can keep putting in your questions, Emily. It's okay. You don't have to wait because, again, I can scroll down. Kelly Sozio, the wearing shields in lieu of masks, the actual guidance says that shields alone are not good enough. So you will need to wear a mask as well. But then again, if you're wearing a shield and you're keeping socially distanced, if it's more beneficial to work with a particular student, those are some of the conversations we're going to have a little closer to the start of school, because that might be very situational, and that, which would be fine to deal with, especially within your building. And we'll add that to our FAQ. Danielle Renazizi, I'm actually not familiar with that guidance at the moment, so we'll look into that, about the guidance of CDC prohibiting masks with vents and valves. We will take a look at that. Okay. We do know that there's a recent study just a few days old on gaiters not being great because it tends to actually split apart the larger particle. And that way it could actually potentially spread further. So I think that the gaiters are, over time, as we learn a little more about that, we will make sure that we have more information about those face coverings, because the gaiters have not been removed in terms of their recommendation from the Department of Health. Emily Kennedy, we don't have the ability for people to answer here. That's not the forum that we've had it. So I'll simply try to answer that for you. There was lots of discussion about the use of the word required, mandated. I believe that's a synonym unless I'm mistaken, but the guidelines actually say only recommended. We went the extra length of requiring it. So that way we have all three of our health and safety measures in place. So what are your classrooms going to look like? Oops, sorry, got to go back. Went too far. The makeup of your classroom is going to obviously change, as we've discussed on numerous occasions, where we're going to limit your room to one teacher desk. The computer will be located on that desk. Each room will have hand sanitizer available at the entrance. And as we figure out and start staging our rooms, your building principals will be available to work with you to help remove things that you may need to store on site, knowing that we cannot have things in the middle of the room that reduce the square footage for us in locating the desks from one another. So as of this morning, we were able to get our hands on our first batch of our barriers. Mr. Harrington and Mr. Cavassa went over and staged a classroom, which has already been staged for the social distancing, but also now with the barriers. And I know it may be a little tough to see, but you might see the black hinges on the barriers there. They're three-sided. I guess it's good news that they're easy to see through at the moment on here. And that would be what a potential room looks like. Remember which one that's from, Scott? Which building? That's Campaign. Okay, it's one of the rooms in Charles Campaign. Oh, better picture of the barriers over there. In some cases, we realize that some desks are not in the most ideal location for students with smartboard access, but better to have them in front of us than not. Every room capacity is different based on the types of setups that are there. Some rooms can hold 18, 16. Other rooms in other spaces can hold 20, 24. The principals have worked that out. And in some cases, some of your rooms do have setups that are just not conducive to this, since we do want to have as many, again, students in your class. And so what does that mean? It means that, to Laura Fitzgerald's questions, there will not be 2 teacher desks in any classrooms unless that class gets small enough to fit it. And you have access to your building at any time, so you can email the principal, and the principals will all be in touch after this with information as well. Lauren, Benji's, if the teacher's standing at the front of the room 6 feet away, will be able to teach without a mask because they're socially distanced. The answer to that in theory is yes. However, the guidance says very clearly that staff must wear their masks at all times. So at the moment, no, you'll have to wear your mask. Again, that's as of today, and sometimes we will have things that change. Please remember that this set of plans is just the beginning of this journey, not the end. We've already made a couple of small adjustments to the original plan on the website, and we can continue to do so as we get more information. So if your room doesn't have any desks and only tables, then either the tables are going to be removed or you are not going to be teaching in that room, to Christine Shara's question. You can use your own mask if you wish. Melissa's question. And then Danielle's question. Danielle, if you have a larger class, it means one of 2 things. Either Some students won't be there and be cycled out to the overflow room or additional space, or rather, you're not teaching in the room you think you're teaching in. It will be moved to another location. So Emily Kennedy, to your question, the answer is yes. Right now we're requiring all three at all times. The only exception at the moment is going to be when we determine what a mask break looks like. The overflow, in terms of who's going, before we figure out who decides which students, the most important thing to note, especially at the secondary level, is there's very few students that would need to attend an overflow area. And if 100% of our students actually attend, I sent out the parent survey to opt out of in-person learning to go to all virtual for the extended period of time. While we say it's for the year, it is noted that they can, in essence, apply to come back quarterly. But if numbers dictate, we may not need any of our students to go out. And we may be able to reduce even the number of desks in a class, or we may even be able to move some rooms back to their more traditional spots for groups that have larger. We shouldn't be sharing items in a lot of ways, Kim, yes, but there are going to be measures put in place for teachers who are sharing desks to have cleaning supplies available. Tim Brace, states masks will be provided for those who need it. What is the CDC guidelines for longevity masks, and will it be readily available for teachers regularly? We do have lots of PPE already on site, so that if students or staff require additional ones, they'll get it. Emily Kennedy, when a student, well, there's going to be lots of expectations that are going to need to be shared with the students, with the staff, training into all of this. And the answer is that yes, we do know that compliance is going to be a huge issue for everyone's sake. The reality is, though, compliance off-site is going to be far more important to our success than compliance on-site, because those that are returning are going to be involved heavily in really believing that they should be back. It's what they're doing when they're home and with their friends and with their families that we are very, very concerned with as well. And that will be a huge part of my message to the parents in the 3 upcoming forums with them. Before I get too deep into a few other questions, I'm going to switch over to our health and safety again with daily health screenings. All staff and students will be asked to complete one at home. We are still working on which format to use. For example, there's a new app. Because it'll be easy to figure out who did it, we're trying to find the easiest way to figure out who did not. And that's going to be an important issue here, especially on how to handle that, and not a single school district that I'm aware of has figured that exact answer out yet, because we don't have the final technology or format in which we're going to work with the product to get these health screenings done. Anybody with 100 or more is supposed to stay home, or any of the symptoms that or questions that are there. We are going to be cleaning and disinfecting with the same types of materials that are top of the line here that we already have on site, following the cleaning guidance as set by the Department of Health. So again, we'll know more about which equipment we're getting, because we are looking to get equipment that allows for the cleaning of the buildings to be a little more efficient. We did, though, add an entire new staff member per building for the night cleaning to help improve that capacity. We know that the mental health and wellness is going to be impacted by all of you. Yourself, your children at home, for those who are parents, and for the children in school. And we are preparing to make sure that that return has a strong focus on the social emotional well-being, and for us to start figuring out what kinds of gaps we may have to attend to that are remaining from the spring. We have made the provision, as we're required to allow, again, the students to choose full distance learning, and that has gone out today live. And within an hour, I had about 32 students who are now going to choose to stay on distance learning. Similar for transportation, our busing and transportation survey went out shortly thereafter and is now also filling with those who are going to choose not to take the bus. Still lots to do between now and the start of school. Similarly to the past 3 times that we met, things are still evolving, being worked on, so we don't have all specifics. We know that arrival and dismissal is going to be some difficult times in all of our buildings. We also know that who's taking transportation and who's not, and who's attending and who's not, is going to impact that. Those parent requests are open until next Wednesday, at which time that we'll be able to start analyzing how many students and where they are and what type of adjustments can then be made from that point. K-6 is cohorting, so passing in hallways is going to occur for grades 7 to 12. Those are going to be far more structured and organized than typical. Again, how many students are going to be in the building at any one time is going to be part of the equation. We'll have to wait until next week to figure that out. But things such as one-way directions and the splitting of hallways will surely be a part of that equation, as we are working on that currently in our extended school year program that has been here for the last 6 weeks. We are working on a variety of ways to provide all of you workspace. For example, we know that it will be highly unlikely that any of the libraries are going to be in the secondary school visited regularly. That may turn into a large space for staff to work in. And then all of the school nurses have been meeting, and yesterday had a big work section with Lisa Lucchese to work on our contact tracing and testing protocols. And so what are those specific responses to symptoms that we determine in the building? And those, of course, are going to be building by building specific, just to name a few of the areas. As I mentioned, we're going to meet again next week. You know, in a week, some things could always change. Plus, what can we do for us to respond to some of the questions posed between now and then? Principals are then, will be continuing to share additional information via email, but after our meeting, they will surely plan some live Google Meet faculty meetings throughout the next coming days. Governor Cuomo, as I wrote to you, made sure that we have to do a few additional things, and those things are in process. Getting our separately provided plans into the website, hosting parent forums that have now been sent to the public for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week, and then having at least one more forum with you, so we have at least 2. And depending on how today goes, we might have others. It has been suggested that I tried to address elementary separately from secondary. Just know that when that was recommended by the committee, the committee also realized it was a little short in time to let you know that today might have been only one of the 2 levels. So that was why we tried this other forum of trying to use YouTube and be able to go beyond the 250. We'll see how it goes by the end of this, if this was worth it, or just go back to Google Meet and have the ability to interact a little more. And as a reminder, we do have a distance learning plan, and if necessary, we'll have to use it, and that could happen, again, at a couple of different times. It could happen because the regional infection rate hits that 9% or greater, and then all schools are closed for in-person learning. Or it could be occurring in a particular class or a particular grade or a particular school based on any particular contact tracing protocol that's in place. And the key is that we'll be able to transition seamlessly between doing it in front of you and doing it from home. It's a requirement that there's daily live interactions between student and teacher, and that period-by-period attendance is maintained throughout. So that's a very important part of it. And so now I'll switch back over my screen and go to your questions like we usually do. Now I can scroll through myself there. Okay.
This is where you left off.
Up here, Jody Smith. Okay. So I'll go back to Emily Kennedy. How do we suggest we handle a student removes his or her mask? That's going to be a building conversation, not a conversation for today, because every building handles their own behavioral issues differently at the 3 different levels of elementary, middle, and high school. So we will add that question to your principal's FAQ. Jody Smith, when will we know which students have opted out in person? I'll know with the administrative team and Stacy Popkin by end of business next Wednesday, so that the adjustments can begin to be made. The teachers, if you're assuming that's for our end of the sake of planning, in terms of teachers and your schedules, that's still currently in the works. Is there a place for backpacks and coats? Michelle Brady, it's a great question. I do think that the backpacks, we are going to likely try to limit how many things the kids are bringing to school. A lot of places have already suggested and recommended that they come with their Chromebook and a string bag worth of things, no more. This way the string bag can hang on the back of the chair or under the desk, and then we're set. But that is also ongoing in conversation with, again, with your principals, and will also be with the instructional planning committee part. Right now, high school campus is open, and we still have high school campuses remaining open at the moment. Did the subcommittee consider temperature checks being conducted at school, and what was the recommendation made by the committee? The committee discussed it at length, and the committee determined that having temperature checks on site as of this moment, and again, these things can change, as of this moment, temperature checks on site cause a lot of problems. The first problem is the bottlenecking of people in locations and not being able to prevent the close contact and having them have to wait with each other to get through a particular location. And then if you have people who have false positives, for example, which definitely happens, those false positives occur regularly when students run from their car across the street to make it on time, or get dropped off a little further away from their parent and jog over to the entrance, or an elementary student who walks on a warm day. And then we are faced with having all of these students who have a temperature, and likely a false temperature, have to be isolated right there on site, and how that's possibly going to happen. As we learn more about best practices, because again, the guidance was incredibly clear that they should have parents taking temperatures and filling out the questionnaires at home, so they never even get a chance to get on the bus, as we have over 1,700 students eligible for transportation. This way, if it's completed there, We know that at least the parents have indicated they checked. If between now and the start of school we are able to find a solution that allows for very easy temperature screening, we may add that as well. But at the moment we don't have that solution, and that was the consensus of the committee. Let me see. If you're a traveling teacher between buildings, do you now have to fill out the death screening at home once? Yes. Staff will have to only complete their screening one time, Kristen. Leon, you need time for training. You're getting used to new spaces. We need time to test out casting on our classroom lessons to hopefully who will not be in our room. Yes, training has been ongoing since March on how to use those tools, and all throughout this summer as well, and we'll continue to make opportunities available, and we'll continue to have conversations about how to get more opportunities for training. How about all the items dropped off? Oh, Toby, great question. No, that's your wheelhouse. We do expect that we will be limiting, well, first of all, visitors are going to be incredibly limited, and secondly, we are going to have all of our new vestibules are now installed and ready for use. So even anyone who's dropping off, no one is actually going to enter the building. They're simply going to be entering the vestibule and not coming into the building. So that's an additional layer. Leon, can we delay bringing students back for a day or two? Not certain yet. That's a good question. We haven't discussed that. That would require a change in the calendar and taking that to the Board of Education. So I don't have an answer for you on that. But we'll also, Karen Thomas and I, and Deb and Dennis have discussed this, and I've said to the committee numerous times, if there's a desire to change the calendar, I sure don't want to force it upon you, because I know there are mixed feelings about adding conference days. And training doesn't necessarily, of course, have to wait until a conference day to take place. But we'll keep talking about that. Am I concerned about the health screening process being left to pretty much an honor system? Yes, we all are incredibly concerned about that. And we recognize that basically all of the screenings are at an honor system, because ultimately, to answer any of those questions, Emily, you still have to do it at home, and it's still on your honor system if you're even in front of us. The same for any visitor that comes to the building, as we have here at the admin building all summer long. So yes, there is a definite concern about that. Are we prepared to issue earpods for students that don't own them, Carrie? The answer is yes. We have headphones that will be available for those that may need it. Vera, will the teachers be made aware of the families that don't complete the daily health survey before school begins each day? The answer is we don't know yet, because we don't know what the actual process is going to look like to identify the people who did not complete the form. And no district has that answer as of yet. And again, because we don't have a lot of information about what type of tools we can use to provide that. For example, if it was just a simple Google form, which is a pretty good start, we know who completed it, and it would take some time to figure out who did not. And then who's going to figure out who didn't complete that. And the principals are working on those types of protocols right now. How will it be determine which teachers will be educating those who will be remote only? Trish's question about remote only. At the moment, if we have a small percentage that would say matches the indication of the parent survey of about 17%, every student that's on your roll, on your class roll, as we've been saying throughout this entire time, is your responsibility. And so if you have students that are at home, and they can be at home for many reasons. That student may be sent home because they are actually quarantined as part of a contact tracing issue outside of the school. And so they self-quarantine. And that would be 2 weeks at home. And then, of course, we have those who are choosing to stay home. And as of right now, the expectation is that the teacher will handle the class that's in front of them as well as their students that are at home during their period by period attendance and teaching. First day of school being delayed has not yet been discussed, Lorraine. I think that goes back to Leon's point. We're still looking at that. Update on testing and contact tracing protocols. Emily, I think I mentioned that earlier, that the nurses are working on that. They spent 7 hours here yesterday with Lisa, and we are going to have a more significant set of protocols. The reality is, with all testing and contact tracing protocols, the answer is supposed to be as per the Department of Health. However, we're going to obviously use the information with the Department of Health to figure out what those specifics may be for our districts. Nassau BOCES has provided some significant guidance to all of the districts to use as a template, and we are also working on that now. All of that specific information is due to be posted as per the governor's mandate by August the 21st, and we will surely have that in place by then, if not before. And that then goes to Laura Hout's question about how we handle a student testing positive. There are going to be specifics on that, which I don't have yet, but again, we're getting much closer to finalizing as we get that information from the Department of Health, and your nurses are working on that now. Split teachers are still going to be moving from building to building. Allison Whitmore, sharing rooms, prep professional lunch for share rooms. Let me go back and try to get your question. Okay. Sorry, give me a second. Yeah, 266, it wasn't worth it to go on YouTube. Miss out on the ability for someone to clarify. Where do we go? Where do you go? Yeah, okay. There we go. So Allison, I think the question about where you go is going to be, oh, I'm sorry. Got a little confused on where the question was. How are the students going to opt out in person learning going to receive the same lesson as the students in class? They'd be following along with you in ways in which Andrew Choi has already done a nice job demonstrating to the Instructional Planning Committee, so that if you're sharing your screen at home from your desktop and you're using your Chromebook for the microphone as an example, and just one of many possible examples, that they would be able to follow along, and you could use the Chromebook to then, the same way, since you'll have less numbers in your class, to spend a little time trying to provide a little feedback to the students that are on Google Meet. Okay. Splits, testing positive. Okay. Our job requires men to work individually with students, whether it's reteaching, helping find materials. I'll try to do this with Barrett. Jen Cotaspati's question about working in close proximity to the students. And I would say that the best place to start is in your special education department, who are working already this summer with students with disabilities in particular, and could surely share some of their great experiences that they're having this summer. I don't have specifics for you to determine how you're going to handle working with your students. Nasli Toder, how many classes or what percent of the building to be quarantined before decision is made? That metric is not, I've never seen anything like that in terms yet of a particular metric. Again, being that Long Island, with all the movement that's going on around Long Island, and it's still remaining at 1%, that's a good sign to get started. And we do know that we are going to make sure that we are very cautious with all of that, but the contact tracing is going to dictate that, and the Department of Health is going to dictate that a lot more than anything I have currently in front of me to decide when buildings get closed. Staff will receive new Chromebooks.
So Monday, my team should be finished with preparing the Chromebooks and expect an email from me with a date to follow when staff members can come in to pick up Chromebooks. We'll do it in a way that we'll offer multiple sessions throughout the day so that it is we can practice social distancing.
Great. So next week you should have them. Lauren Lowe, we mentioned passing is going to be, first of all, both JFK and the high school are going to have potentially slightly different bell schedules than they've had, with a little bit more, another minute or two at times for passing, and try to do passing in some form of a staggered way, and that will be shared with you by your building principals. Targeting training for all staff, I suppose. Lori Holt, if parents opt out, can they change their mind at any time and come back to school? We were very clear in our letter to the parents that, in essence, they're signing up to be out for the whole year, and that we will take, we'll call it a request to come back quarterly in the high school and middle school, and at the end of the marking period, the trimester in the elementary school, to try to be consistent. We are going to avoid having students bounce back and forth. That's in terms of, again, the opting in or opting out piece of it. What won't be able to be maintained there is if students are forced to go home based on, again, an exposure. And most likely those exposures I'm referring to are ones outside of school, that they then go on self-quarantine at home, and you have 1 or 2 students at a time, which actually was not an exposure at school that ends up staying home. Emily Kennedy, staff training. I don't have specifics to that right now. When we do, we'll share it with you. Denise, if you have leave of absence issues, you have to, I don't have a deadline. I simply suggest if you have concerns about returning, you need to make an appointment to speak to Caroline Lavelle the sooner rather than later. And extra chargers, so we don't want to share. Yes, Mike Spence has already secured a lot of extra chargers for the buildings to have because of the intense need for the Chromebooks and not wanting to share items. Monitor High School, having spoken with many of the others. We'll surely be specifically talking about your jobs as monitors, teacher assistants, teacher aides, clerical, custodial with your building principals. Maureen Luca, use of materials if they have gloves on. It's a great question. We're going to add that to the list of questions we still need to answer, because we aren't going to expect people to bring gloves regularly. The reality is the advice from the medical experts continue to indicate that gloves aren't necessary, that hand washing is, because gloves actually don't help you that much, because if you have gloves on and they get tainted with infectious material and you don't take them off before you touch yourself, you've just done the same as if you had no gloves whatsoever. So it's really the hand washing that is of paramount need here. Zach Levy, what qualifies for exposure? That's being worked out, and we'll have those specifics shortly. In terms of what type of direct exposure you need in order to qualify for someone who goes on 14-day isolation. Bathroom policies and procedures are going to be handled by your building principals. I don't have specifics on that because there are going to be, of course, issues where we are going to make sure they get cleaned on a regular basis after uses, and we also want to make sure we know when kids are going and where they went for potential items on contact tracing. The subcommittee discussed having training before our start date and has not made a determination or a recommendation, Emily, because that again would make a change to the calendar and had to be discussed with each unit. We know it's extremely hot in September. Now with masks on, it will be brutal. Are fans allowed in classrooms? The answer to that is unknown, and the reason why is the recent guidance to just a day or two ago about fans is that it's actually not known yet if it's beneficial, harmful, or benign to add fans to the room. We know that, of course, we've said that if there are air conditioners as part of a health plan, that those are by the guidance are supposed to be turned on because that particular reason why there's an air conditioner will trump the potential for needing fresh air. Let me just go back and stop for one moment. I know that we have still many questions here I have to go through. And I regret now having done this on YouTube with only 262 watching. And the reason I regret it is no ability for me to really interact with anybody or have you clarify your points. So my apologies. We'll try and we'll do it the other way next time. And if I have to add an extra one to get more on, I surely will. I need to remind you of something very, very clear. The health and safety protocols that the committee has put in place, that we are maintaining in all of our plans, these are far more strict than any place any of you visit once you leave your home. We've already ensured that all three of our protocols are there, requiring masks, the use of barriers, the social distancing of all the desks, the reduced capacities of places, the use of outdoors where we can, where we're adding tents, recess in many areas, maybe multiple times. We hope, especially for the younger kids. Taking classes outdoors when the weather permits. And part of that is to recognize that the 3 months that we went through last spring, as long as they felt, was still only a third of the year, not even. We have 10 months to get through, and part of this is going to be a combination of getting through blocks of time and evaluating how we're doing. Our plans are built by the committee to be able to transition between one plan to another, and that could be district-wide or it can be building-specific. And that's why you have districts who may not be going with the same approach as Bethpage is, because they cannot maintain all three of those items, all three of those protocols at each one of their levels. We do know there'll be very few high schools that are likely to be all present all days. But we're fortunate that we have a building that was built to host and home a lot larger student population than we have. We have a faculty that was built to teach 1,150, 1,200 students, and then over time with those 150, 200 students, that's been reduced since then. Staffing has not. So we were very fortunate. We like to keep our class sizes down. We know that's not the case in every particular section, but in general across the average. And that allowed the building administration to build a plan so that they can move some classes around to spaces that are larger for the larger classes, and of course smaller sections to smaller rooms, but still maintain social distancing. And then if necessary, have a few students, if all 100% attended, go out maybe once a week and follow along as if they were home for that period. It's not a whole day, just potentially that period. And we won't have the specific manner in which that's going to be handled until we know exactly who's showing up. And that's, again, as mentioned, still to come. Maria, Director, how will we be giving grades to students who are learning remotely? The same way you would if they were in front of you. They will be expected to follow along as they would if they were in front of you. The same as we imagine what the spring was like. And again, the requirement is to make sure no matter what we're doing, all in person, hybrid, or distance learning, that there are going to be full commitment that every student gets taught, and every student will be taught to the best of our ability the whole curriculum. That's what we have been stating each and every time I've met with you in the past. We've stated that clearly throughout all of the planning of our committees, and the committee agrees with all of that. And so the idea is that we're going to have to make adjustments and be adaptable so that we can make sure that all of our students' needs are going to be met to the best of our ability. But as I said last time we met, nobody expects that what they're getting at home to be exactly as good as what they're getting in front of you, because it never is. Whether some are at home or all are at home, it's never as good as being in front of each and every one of you. How we securely test them is going to be, again, some of the adaptation that we're going to have to make in some of our types of assessments, some of the tools that we use, the ability to potentially use whatever Google extensions and apps we have available to us. And that's what some of the work that's being done by your colleagues now and some of the courses that they're teaching, and we'll hope to continue to do as well. So the answer is they will be all held to the same standards that are set by you as the classroom teacher. We will not interfere with your standard that you set in your classroom. Randall Corcoran, Sue Corcoran, having a camera running for the children who are doing their learning remotely create an issue with privacy for students. No, it doesn't, because in the end, if you are running your camera, it doesn't mean that you're showing anything to anyone, because we have a number of already strategies in place with how to share screens so that they don't see things at home or vice versa. So we are able to mitigate that throughout our distance learning. Sorry, not as easy to scroll here. It's very quick. Okay. Some rooms don't have sinks. Yes, sinks are not available all the time. That's why the hand sanitizers are preferred. And part of the reason is because if you're not washing your hands for at least 20 seconds, it's not as effective as if you wash your hands with hand sanitizer. And again, that was made clear by our health expert on our Return to School Committee. And considering how many kids may need to wash hands and as often as they do, we don't have the capacity to add sinks yet, although we're trying to look into what some of these portable sinks might look like. But the hand sanitizing stations are already in every location and continuing to be added, and will be added as needed if we find other places to go to. Carrie would love for aides or assistants to be considered for the kindergarten classroom, especially first few weeks. I would love to be able to provide you with an unlimited supply of people and support. I think that's a great question for your building principals to understand your concerns, so please share that with them, as I will as well, that you would love an extra set of hands in the youngest grades. I think Deb Falzarana would probably agree with you that it's going to be quite a tall task in having our youngest students, who are attracted to each other like magnets, learn how to stay away from each other and handle themselves in a setting that requires a lot of concentration and focus when they don't have it yet. Lauren Lowe, how many other public high schools going back to in person? I have no idea. I haven't checked, and I don't have anyone's survey yet to tell us what they're doing. I know that there was a percentage of Nassau County schools in a superintendent survey that there were a handful of us that said that we intended to do it, but I don't know what their final outcome is. Will special teachers have access to smart boards in the rooms they travel to? Michelle Kovacs, yes. I think all the smart boards should be accessible, and the question is whether you're going to log on and off or whether you're going to somehow use your Chromebook. The difference being, if you do use your Chromebook, which can connect, if the one caveat is you do lose the smart notebook capacity to write on the board, but you surely can present on the board if you don't need the interactive nature of the pen. If teachers are expected to travel between classrooms, will the district provide carts? Sure. Any teacher who needs carts to help them will be provided. We know that's going to be especially important in K-6. So absolutely. And you know, if 7 to 12 needs it as well, because they're in different locations than they've been, we sure will look to provide carts. A big problem in the second floor bathrooms in the high school, only have cold running water. Mr. Harrington's here, he puts that on his top of his list. Allison Whitmore, thank you for clarifying. On your off period, you will go to any number of places that your principal determines. For example, in the middle school, it will potentially be the library as one of the larger locations. We have the smaller workrooms, of course, in addition to that, and I don't know what else he has planned. Rooms without air conditioning, Veronica, will be with windows open as much as possible for as long as possible. Doors as well should remain open to allow the free flow of air. Back to teacher remote learners on our roster at home. Other districts are using teachers that can't come into high risk. Yes, other districts that are doing that. I don't know of anybody who's doing that in the high school level. Emily, I do know that there's potential that if districts have a really large number of children that stay home, that they can possibly do a district-wide grade 1 class, a district-wide grade 2 class, etc. I have not heard of any district thus far that is doing that at the secondary level. A district of our size and a secondary school with as robust a program as we have and all of the offerings, it would be impossible to imagine us being able to offer remote option with the 5 levels of English 9, the 5 levels of English 10, and so on, as you can imagine, to be able to provide that. Okay. Sorry, let me keep going. Second floor bathrooms, Allison, Veronica, Emily. The instructional, Emily, your point about how are you going to handle your instruction, I don't have answers for you. That's what the instructional planning committee has been, reviewing, but also that's for us as staff to figure out together, not surely for an administrator to tell you how to. We just know that whatever we can do to help support it, we will. We also know that since there's clearly no group work in the traditional sense of putting desks together and working, that has already created an issue for teachers who have worked an entire career in how to provide cooperative learning opportunities and hands-on approaches that will not be able to exist during this type of global economic pandemic crisis. Students will be informed about acceptable use form. There is no acceptable use form. We are getting that policy approved in the later August board meeting, and that will be added to it. There is an acceptable use form, policy rather, already in the Code of Conduct. The Instructional Planning Committee, led by Dennis, produced 2 documents. One is actually a full-fledged policy, and a second is a guidance document for teachers to help train their children in how to best use remote learning. With all the anticipated changes, and Laura Howell, that's not a question for this forum. Feel free to bring that to your leadership, but MOAs are not sure what the purpose would be personally, but that's not a question for me. On page 37, under test, yes, the Distant Learning Code of Conduct, Emily, as I mentioned, is being brought to the board for approval on August 25th. Marie, Director, how do we keep the kids at home honest with taking quizzes? think that's been, ongoing throughout the country, so it sure isn't that we're alone in trying to figure out how to do that. I do know we do have, thankfully, hundreds of thousands of teachers working on those solutions. I'm sure by the time school starts, we'll have better answers than what we had for consistency last spring. Let's see. Emily Kennedy, I believe if you're referring to the development of the policy on acceptable use, again, that was developed by the teachers on the distance learning committee. On the instructional planning committee for distance learning. So if you want to refer to one of those members, they can share some information with you, but that was totally driven by them. Student lunch periods, Julie Ahrenheim. K to 6 are eating in their classrooms at all times to start the school year. 7 through 12 are going to have a variety of places where students are going to be assigned to eat, to limit, of course, the density of people, to keep social distancing in place since you can't wear a mask while you eat. And that might include, of course, for the early part of the year, outdoors. And we will try to get students outside as much as possible. Sue McGarvey, are they allowed to use textbooks? Sure, you can give kids textbooks. How do we manage questions or technical trouble working remotely while teaching students in class? Linda Parascandola, how do we manage technical trouble? We simply will start figuring out what kind of technical trouble they may have, but of course, in the end, we know that some of these issues that we're going to deal with are going to be dealt with on a day-to-day basis and a case-by-case basis. We're not going to have all the answers at all for all of those situations until sometimes they arise. Okay. Are we considering a heat index clause in the plan? That wasn't recommended by any of the guidance documents, but Mr. Harrington, who handles health and safety, is writing that down. And the heat index, of course, would be something that would have to be inside the building, not just outside the building. Yeah. Additional instructional rooms. Emily Kennedy's question about page 21. Supervised, supported by a certified teacher. It's not going to be a teacher's duty to, actually I don't know what the plan is for the building, and part of it is we don't know what periods are going to require it. So the specifics of how they're getting covered, in the end, in the elementary level, it's going to be permanent substitutes and teacher assistants, and we would expect that also to be the same likely for 6 to 12. Who decides which student? I mentioned that question. I answered that question earlier, Emily, about who decides and how, and that's going to be, again, based on your building principal's plan and how that coordinates with how many kids that need to go. Laura, you can definitely hand things out in class. For example, if you simply handed out papers, they work on them, they put them in a folder and take them home. So what we would likely see is a lot less binders in school and a lot more of you working with them on the daily stuff and those daily things going home and not necessarily coming back. Be able to conduct school activities in club. Michael Barden, after school activities, clubs, extracurriculars, athletics, they are all postponed until further notice. Athletics is obviously heavily on a lot of people's minds, and it has been delayed at the start of the season until September 21st. Mr. Franchi is the president of the Section 8 Athletic Directors Association. We speak regularly, and he has absolutely no idea what's going on. We talk about it all the time. So we do not know. And in addition to that, some after-school activities are going to be conducive to doing things, I'll say, remotely or through virtual means, and others are not. And so we're still trying to determine what type of activities should exist after school, and likely we'll not start with them immediately anyway, as they don't begin for the first few weeks, and determine where we go from there. Extra help sessions we're working out to try to determine how to best do that. There's a lot of suggestions that we've had from other teachers that I've seen about the timing of which to do it, or is it best just to do it by getting online and letting people log into your Google Classroom to ask, as opposed to having to have other students continue to stay after school and mix with you? Jen Cardaspati, how is testing accommodations room going to work? That's a good question. I know that Janine Ciccoli and Lisa Lucchese are working on that. Again, there's a wonderful committee that the Special Education Department has been working with Janine Ciccoli on a number of items, and so we'll bring that question to them. What about before school music rehearsals? Deb Stellick, yes, we were talking with the principals yesterday. It's strong consensus around Long Island that nobody's sure what to do about that yet, and we are 99% sure going to not start with any before school music rehearsals, because especially in the we are going to end up with a situation where you're mixing kids that are then going back off to their classes and trying to stay separated, and we in essence have taken away one of the safety measures for contact tracing. So to start the school year, it's unlikely to have any before school music rehearsals. Gene Cano, if you need more copies, we'll sure try to provide them. I'm not sure how many people are going to move into more heavily use of paper as opposed to having it online, but if we find the need, we will. Emily Kennedy, I see your question about MOA and support, and again, I haven't had anything suggested about what that would look like, so if there's a concern, be happy to bring them forward. As I've said before, we had 0 issues during March to June for 3 full months, with lots of staff having Google Meets and instruction daily, and so I simply rely on the fact that we have a lot of history teachers here who can say that, hey, let's learn from the history, and the history is that things have gone very well here, of no concern. There was one incident of a concern of somebody taping. It turned out to be not true. We looked into it. We took it very seriously. If anything like that happens, we will surely continue to take it seriously. Ultimately, there's no difference than what could be done in your classroom with anybody in front of you, which is that students have their phones. They could be taping you and videoing you in front of you in daily class, and have potentially been doing that for years, and we will handle that strongly and swiftly and support the teaching staff and the rest of the staff with that always, and we have. So I simply rely on the fact that we have a really strong record of working together as staff members and be able to handle those situations as they come up, since there should be no precedent to worry about under these circumstances. Carrie Treadwell, it's a great question about how to get materials. The potential on the overflow rooms are that they may show up to you, you hand them the materials, and then they go. Wendy Way, is there a time they're required to be out of the buildings? We're not certain yet, but that's the part of the question would be about extra help. So the answer is we do hope that staff will get what they need and allow the cleaning staff to get started as soon as possible. But nothing per se that's written in stone about how long you need to or can stay, because I'm sure there'll be people who would like to stay and work in their rooms or a room, and would likely be able to if most everyone else is also leaving. Tom, will any teachers be teaching on certifications? I'm sure there'll be some cases of that, although the schedules are not yet set. So, for example, the 6th grade is likely to have a slightly different look than typical in order to maintain the cohorts. Most 6th graders get 3 out of 4 possible electives. Now they're going to get all 4, because again, the teachers will come to them. And so that means somebody may have to teach a section or 2 out of their certification area, but I don't know for sure. I just speculating from a recent conversation with Mr. Fullerton. Okay. Let me see. I'm going to my house students. I don't get the packets. Students at home, if we have to send things at home, there would be, I would hope by now that any material that you would use would be also located on your Google Classroom. So that means anything that you use in class would be accessible by somebody at home, and they would be either expected to print it on their own, or if we had a particular packet that is extensive that would be produced here on site, we could also work on having them delivered at home. That's how a lot of this districts that don't have technology handled their distance learning, is with a regular series of deliveries going home to the communities. In regards to airflow, Renee, the most important thing to note, that you'll be pleased with the other physical education teachers in the high school, is that we had a large project completed where now we do have the windows able to be opened electronically. So that's one thing to start. Secondly, we are absolutely going to consider being able to open doors and station security in places to help increase airflow. But then again, Renee, you won't be teaching in the gym at any time, because all gym classes are going to be outdoors until further notice. And if they can't go outdoors, and that because of weather issues, they may be able to be stationed outside under tents and conduct other types of activities, or handle more classroom type activities at individualized seats. Mr. Toko is working on those right now. Permanent subs. We do have permanent subs in place, Amanda. This time of the year, we know we have a number of permanent subs in each building that we maintain, and we never have them all in place before school starts. That has changed. Caroline is already, on Tuesday, we approved a full allotment of permanent substitutes to each building, plus a few extra, so that we are already above our normal capacity. Now, as always, we tried to make sure that we're on the agenda early in August to get them something. But as always, each and every day, Ms. Lavelle gets another person resigning who's gotten a bigger opportunity. So we will continue to do that. Lou, AIS right now is on hold until further notice. What will the academic center look like? Actually is going to be very interesting to know. That's a good question that we'll bring back to Mr. Jantz. Your grades will be entered in Infinite Campus, as will your attendance, like normal on a day-to-day basis. The good news is, two things. There is a Google, what's the grade transfer? Google has their own extension to coordinate grades. And I just got notice the beginning of the week that Infinite Campus is working on their own grade integration from Google Classroom directly. And they hope to release that, I think it was September, possibly, right? September, October, they're looking to release that as well. Well, Emily, there are protections in place. When you do the right thing and somebody gives you a hard time, we support teachers at all times. And that will continue to be the case. Also, one issue that you were made aware of, or you're speaking of all the admins from the buildings, also one issue. That issue that we were made aware of was shared with the entire administrative team to understand some of the concerns and look into it carefully. So we were aware to be on the lookout for possibilities of this, to make sure that, again, nobody was caught by surprise of it. So we were incredibly thorough, and Andrew and the IT team dug into that intensely to determine what the outcome was. And we're, again, all in the effort to support the staff. The question about adding instructional space or instructional room, it complicates contact tracing. Yes, it does. No doubt about it, as does the ability to change classes from one class to another, as does the ability for seniors to be off campus if they wish, as does taking the bus with different groups than you have in school. So yes, all very complicated and never done before, we know. Again, we know that the safest way entirely is to not come at all. But we know that that's not going to be something that is really sustainable over time. And we know that there's some serious, serious unintended consequences of having students be at home, especially being at the beginning of the year when they don't even know who you are. Emily's question, if put into quarantine but not sick, are you required to teach your classes remotely? That's a great question. I'll say my first instinct, not that this is official, is that if you're put in quarantine and somehow we can make sure you can teach your classes, then we would help you do so. And then, of course, it doesn't count against your time. If it's the reverse, however we handle the time, I don't even know how we do that. But so that's a good one that we will put on our list of to be asked. Mr. Harrington's got his top 10 ready to go for me. Sue Ann Keller, when will we be informed if our schedule is going to change? I think I just told you your schedule is going to change. And why is it going to change? I believe that you're going to do, at the very least, or many of you are going to end up in locations that have changed. Whether or not your actual schedule and what you're teaching has changed, I don't think that's going to happen for very many. I think, again, the 6th grade and your electives are going to be the ones who are uncertain about that. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. They're not quite done. Allison, I mentioned extra help a few moments ago. We're not certain what that's going to look like yet. We're still working on that. Emily Kennedy, there are no requirements for anyone to be tested prior to the return to school. Part of the reason there are no requirements is that it's impossible. It has been made very clear by the Department of Health guidelines. That's okay, Allison, not a problem. It took me 3 times to get to your other question, too. Sorry about that. They made it very clear that we should not be requiring everybody, teachers, other staff members, students, to get tested because that's an impossible quantity to handle. And so again, it's only based on some of the guidelines of what type of interactions you have with suspected infected people or confirmed infected people, and then what you should do. And those are going to be laid out in the contact tracing guidance that the nurses are preparing for you right now in terms of specifics of who should or will be able to come in. Renee, how can you be assured that the rooms are cleaned correctly? We are required to keep logs and obviously supervise to make sure that those take place. And so those measures are already being put into place.
We did, Mr. Schneider, get some questions via email as well.
Oh, let me pop over to email. Where's my edge? Let's see. You threw them into 13th form?
That is correct.
Thank you. Olivia, thank you for that suggestion on Google Classroom. Yes, we do have it that way. The issue is trying to figure out who did not in a quicker way than just Google Forms, but we're working on that. But thank you for that suggestion. Requesting a chart. A cart. Oh. Monica, you got it. You got a chart. Sorry, there's a misprint there. A cart. I see you copied in Kevin, so he'll note that. Gloria, allowed to use level books that are not photocopied for individual use? Yes, we are going to be allowed to handle materials. I do want to point out that, again, it was very clear from the medical expert on our committee, surface to person contact is incredibly low for infection. It is really defined more as 15 minutes or more of direct contact. Even passing in the hallways poses very small risk, especially when you are wearing masks, which we will require. So that is always good news. Again, that's why the doctor was very clear that you don't even need to clean the desks between use. You just have to make sure kids wash their hands in between period by period as they come in and out of a location. To wash their hands is the biggest key. That's similar to Gloria's question regarding the materials that we're using. And so, again, so much of this is going to the as far extreme end as possible in terms of what we can accomplish. So yes, the leveled books, and then what we might want to do is talk about how to best handle those books at the end of the day, because even the time frame of when things are left out helps in reduce the potential for any infection. Amanda, your chat's not working. Actual great question, Amanda Sursick. Because of HIPAA laws, how will we know if someone is sick? So anytime someone is sick, meaning they've been tested and have been determined to be sick, we will be informed as the district, and based on contact tracing protocols, those people will do those people will have to do what they're supposed to in following through in terms of any sort of, I'll say, identifying of the person. And yes, that is a really tough, slippery slope here. And that's what the protocols in the contact tracing that are being worked on right now. And thank you, Danielle, for I'll check out that site. Let me go back to here. Okay. The Board of Education meetings are through September 4th allowed to be virtual, and my guess, I haven't discussed it with the board president, but my guess is that the August 25th meeting will again be virtual. And then we have another meeting not until late September, and that was based on the governor's executive order. Math, home teaching, Mr. Queso, the home teaching, home instruction, once we went to the ability to be on a class roll will possibly change. Lisa Lucchese will be in touch with those that are involved in home tutoring. How will attendance be taken period for overall students? That would be, I will say that the tardy issue is going to be something that Mr. Healy, Mr. Toko are working out in terms of getting to class. And again, I don't have the specifics of Mr. Jantz's overflow procedures. I do know that it is so small that he had it down into single digits for some periods. Many periods had none required. And again, this is if everyone showed up. So once we get a better understanding of what does overflow even mean, we are talking about it in the most severe case, which is, again, 100% attendance every day. So the likelihood is that even what I might tell you now might be changed dramatically once we figure out what the students that are in attendance is going to look like. Thank you, Sue McGarvey. Appreciate it. Well, we're going to have more time to prepare. Emily Kenny, a question about regarding needing more time to prepare. We're expected to train in 10 hours to get ready. That's an ongoing issue for teachers in all places at all times, isn't it? Right? We prepare for our year each and every summer, and we make things available to you. If you want more mandated time, I'm happy to find a way to provide it. I just don't know, that's a conversation I want to have with the BCT, with the teacher assistants, and so I'm all ears and have been saying that to the committee for a while. I haven't had any suggestions on what I should provide that we haven't already provided. I'm definitely interested in hearing back. Share that with your leadership, Dennis, Deb Falzerano, and Karen, and they will bring me some ideas if you have any. Absolutely. What happens with the microscopes and lab equipment in science class? you're able to use equipment, and we're still working on exactly how when the equipment is being used, it's going to change hands. But there is a lab requirement, as you know, in high school science classes, and those requirements have been eased to include less hands-on opportunities under this time by the state of New York. Maureen, thank you very much. Superintendent's Conference Day at the moment is still, being designed to provide you with as much support to get started as possible. And as you see, Juliana LaLuna mentions that all the PD classes from the summer have been great and helpful, and she's taken most of them, so we're glad you are able to do that. Most of these classes are all run by you guys. And so anyone have suggestions or willingness to add more, Mike Spence is all ears, ready to go. Dina, yes, the early start of each school, those first few days are going to be heavily laden with practices and procedures and rules and welcome backs and great to see yous and making students and staff together feel comfortable. So yes, that is going to be the case. And again, your building principal will have more specifics, especially in the secondary, where dealing with slight adjustments in bell schedules is going to be helpful in accomplishing some of that. Kim Barnett, I see you. I understand you feel unprepared. Let me know what kind of training you're looking for, and we'll provide it. Again, teaching practices, that's why we have all this PD going on. If you have not been able to take advantage of those PD opportunities, I understand, and we'll try to continue to make more. If you'd like, we could consider coming back early with PD days. We could absolutely look to do that. But again, that requires a formal change in the calendar, and from previous conversations, that was not desirable. And so I agreed not to even consider changing the calendar. That was from the committee that we had. That was from the previous meetings with all of you. It was very clear to me that we didn't want to look at the calendar, and I gave my word that I surely wouldn't look at it. Renee Gannon is going to be tested in her health background unlike any year, with 18-year-old sweaty and smelly children around. You bet. Oh, she took that back. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Conference day is not yet determined, Jody, about where it's going to be. The goal is going to try to design it so that you can be in places where you can work alongside your colleagues as much as possible to feel more prepared. Okay. And where are they cleaning up? Yeah, it's a good question. Hopefully we don't spend as much time on the heavier, we are supposed to, and actually Renee, that's a great point about your physical education classes in particular. And that's to make sure that you end up with your team, with Mr. Franchi, to determine what kind of actual physical education activities and programs are we going to be instituting. And that, because we are supposed to make sure that if there is anything that really gets your heart rate up and more intense breathing, that the space is no longer 6 feet required, it's 12. So I don't know exactly what your department's plans are yet into how to handle the instruction piece. Jerry, again, that's a big ask, because this, in terms of changing to the beginning of September, and the reason is because then all of you have to teach that day. And we know that with this election coming up, to make it where we have to teach and kids have to be in the building, possibly, if the buildings are still open, November, whatever we are, 4th, is it? Then people have to come to the building too. So that one is a tough ask, because we, in terms of security, and then if we're fortunate enough to still be in the building in November, then bringing in visitors, we can't deny visitors. We can't even ask for IDs from visitors when it comes to elections. So that's a very tough one to simply swap out. And then again, in Bethpage, unlike most districts, we only have those 2 conference days on our calendar. The rest have been left for you to give you time with your kids. And so to make that change is a significant issue, and have to go in front of the Board of Education again to try to change the 2 conference days in total to more than that, where 4 is the maximum. Renee, what kind of equipment are you referring to? I'm not sure. If you can expand on that. Sorry, I can't speak to you directly on with the YouTube link. Anything else on pop up on the other one?
Emails
Okay, great.
were clear.
How many on the parent side?
43.
Oh! Okay. Okay. Yes, Emily, most of those superintendents in terms of start date, most of those superintendents long before COVID have already forced staff to come in 2 or 3 days prior to the start of school because they've had 3 or 4 days on the calendar. We have not. And so, again, and again, part of that is to reduce the concern that a lot of staff had about me changing the calendar and they having plans. I know that was expressed tremendously because, again, to now kick the kids down further in the week and start even later is not a great thing, and so possibly we would add the Wednesday or Tuesday in addition to it, like they have in my home district or that they have in my wife's district. But that was very clear to me that the teachers didn't want me to put another day or 2 in advance. And again, those are some pretty serious issues. But I'm all ears. I'm sure can't answer that on this call, on this forum here. But we'll talk again to your leadership about if they want to somehow come in and when. Renee, again, athletic equipment is going to be a conversation with Mr. Franchi about how you guys are going to actually teach and what you're going to teach before I can answer specific. Is it reasonable to assume that we're expected to be preparing or utilizing the training for the school year? Well, if you're not supposed to prepare training on how to deal with COVID cases and COVID protocols, but you are supposed to prepare to teach, Melissa. So that's definitely why we have things that have been made available all summer long, as we would every summer, which is again, depends on where you are in your comfort zones within your classrooms and how prepared you are. We know that there are plenty of examples of your staff members putting themselves out there to teach these courses to help prepare you better. But yes, the expectation is that you get yourselves ready to teach as much as you can prior to any, 1 or 2 days before the start of school. I think that's a reasonable expectation of everyone. Okay, I do appreciate your time. I've kind of yes, Arati, again, we're not even sure that's going to be necessary, and that's going to be a very small case. Again, imagine just 1 or 2 kids that aren't able to fit in your class, that have to go, that are home sick for the day. That would be similar while being able to have them attend this time. Jim Miller has a great example of that, having done incredible work with A.J. Terabakia a few years ago when he was unable to attend school. So we know those things are accomplishable. And again, anything with a separate location for secondary may not even be necessary. And if it were, again, it's a very small proportion of a class on any particular day if they all attended. No, Maria, Director, I got what you're saying. I think I said that it's a very tough ask to now push the community back even further. I'm not, and something I have to take to the Board of Education. I'm not adverse to it. But again, then we're making a commitment to have less days with the kids as well. Back to school nights are pretty safe to say are going to need an adjustment. Maria, we're not sure what they're going to look like, and parent-teacher conferences are likely to all take place online to prevent you from having to, and frankly all the people having to come up here under a short period of time. But we're not certain yet. We're just working on that stuff. So again, I'm going to get back to the most important stuff, which is that these plans put together by our extensive back-to-school committee contain all of the safety measures that are recommended for our classrooms, all three at all times, and they're not compromising those. Other places might. We are not, which again, as we've been saying from the beginning, it is impossible to expect to be in school with zero risk, because there is no place on earth now that there is zero risk, is so long as you leave your home. Our place of business, a school, is now going to be more safely put together to be with people than any other location that you go indoors anywhere in New York State. And that's because we're expected to do that on behalf of the students and staff, far more than you would in a restaurant, in the supermarket, in Home Depot, Costco, etc. So we have all of those things going for us to make sure that this is a very successful return to school. And we go one day, 1 week at a time. If things do not go well, if things start to indicate that they're about to not go well regionally, we are being prepared to make adjustments as needed, and we will do so. Okay? So based on the number of people that are here today, which I think it kind of maxed out about 270, and we're down to 225, I do want to say thanks to everybody for making it. Under the circumstances, I definitely appreciate you putting up with my attempt to use the YouTube link and the chat to put this together. But I may return to Google Meet next week to provide a little better interactive nature there. Well, I'll let you know. And I'll be doing presentations for the parents Monday night, Tuesday 1 o'clock. So Monday 7, Tuesday 1 o'clock, and Wednesday 5 o'clock. Parents have until the end of Wednesday to give us again their indication of whether they're staying home on distance learning or not, and the same goes for their transportation, so we'll take care of that. And then we'll keep working on getting you information. What I'll say about that, and to Ann's point, I said earlier that your building principal will be reaching out with lots of different information, hopefully starting now, including, hey, if you need to come in and check out that you have some stuff, you think you have a lot of stuff in your room and you may need to have a few things removed or put elsewhere, they'll do that. And separately, shortly after I meet with all of you again next Wednesday is when the building principals will start their series of meetings. So again, so we'll say late next week to early the following week at the latest, you would likely have a building level meeting, to say the least, at least one. Okay? Appreciate your time, everybody. I agree with Renee. It's very frustrating for all of us. No time in the past have we ever tried to attempt to do this. But in the end, if we're adaptable, if we all work together on this, and I'm actually reading off a note I took myself for this particular purpose, right? We have to try to be adaptable because we're asking everyone else to also be adaptable, our kids, our parents, Adaptability is having a classroom without groups and with barriers and still thinking that I believe I can still teach, and you know what? Perhaps better than ever. Thanks very much. Barriers are on order, Emily Kennedy, not all in. We just got the money moved on Tuesday. $120,000 commitment by the district. And one last thing, as I said, I will only park this video for review if I feel comfortable that it's going to be left only to our people. And the reason is I don't think it's fair to have all of your questions accessible by the public. And Karen and I spoke about that earlier this morning. It was a good suggestion, but that's one of the reasons why I haven't taped any of this, is I don't want people to feel as if they can't ask a question because they don't want to have their questions publicly scrutinized. So, thank you, everybody.